By now, you've probably seen the headlines. A brand new In-N-Out, a crowded Saturday afternoon, 3 people dead, 7 more injured, a 24-year-old gunman named Chad Williams, dead at the scene. But if you've been following this story online, you've also seen something else. Rumors. Claims about the shooter's identity, supposed motives, viral screenshots, social media posts that spread to millions of people before anyone knew whether they were real. Here's the problem. Much of that information hasn't been confirmed, and some of it has already been proven false. So, in this video, we're going to rewind everything. We'll walk through exactly what happened, minute by minute, using only information confirmed by investigators, hospital officials, and verified reporting. We'll separate established facts from internet speculation, explain what police have actually said about the shooter, look at the response that may have prevented even more lives from being lost, and cover the biggest question that still doesn't have an answer. Because even several days later, there are critical parts of this case that remain unknown. By the end of this video, you'll have a complete picture of what happened in Twin Falls, what we know, what we don't, and why the investigation is far from over. Let's start at the beginning. On Saturday, August 1st, 2026, a gunman opened fire in and around a newly opened In-N-Out Burger in Twin Falls, Idaho. The restaurant sits on Blue Lakes Boulevard, in one of the city's busiest commercial corridors, an area lined with hotels, chain retailers, and other restaurants. It's the kind of stretch that's usually full of families, tourists passing through, and locals grabbing lunch. This particular In-N-Out had only opened its doors about a week earlier, on July 24th, as part of the chain's push into Idaho. It was still new, still a novelty for a lot of people in the area. And then, in the space of a few minutes on a Saturday afternoon, it became the scene of one of the deadliest shootings in the state's recent history. The restaurant's address is 1965 Blue Lakes Boulevard North, and it was one of the first Idaho locations for the California-based chain as it continued its expansion into the state. For a business that thrives on being a local landmark, on lines out the door, and a kind of hometown excitement every time a new location opens, the timing here is almost impossible to sit with. A place that was supposed to represent something new and good for the city became the site of a tragedy within days of its ribbon cutting. Twin Falls Police posted on social media at 2:23 in the afternoon that officers were responding to an active shooter incident. Just a few minutes later, at 2:29 p.m., the city's Emergency Communications Center began receiving a wave of 911 calls, all reporting shots fired at the same location. Twin Falls Police Chief Matthew Hicks later told reporters that dispatchers could hear screaming and gunshots in the background of those calls.
What's happening?
What happened?
What's happening?
Shoot! Shoot! Go! Just go! 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 Go!
That detail alone tells you how chaotic those first minutes were. People weren't calling after the fact to report something that had already ended. They were calling from inside it. In an early update that same Saturday evening, before the full casualty count had been confirmed, police said simply that multiple people had been transported to St. Luke's Magic Valley Medical Center and that, in their words, there had tragically been fatalities. That short, careful phrasing says a lot about how law enforcement handled this from the very first hours. Confirm only what's certain, hold back everything else. Even as pressure mounted from every direction to say more, the department stuck to that approach. Officers from Twin Falls Police, along with state and federal law enforcement partners, responded almost immediately. The Twin Falls Fire Department and Magic Valley paramedics were right behind them, treating the wounded and getting people to nearby hospitals. Chief Hicks would later describe the scene his officers walked into as one of the most chaotic situations a law enforcement officer can face in an entire career. That's not a phrase officials use lightly, and it gives you a sense of just how much was happening at once, across a parking lot and a restaurant full of people who had no warning any of this was coming. Witnesses described a scene of pure panic. One Twin Falls resident, who had been sitting in the drive-through line with her mother, later said that at first she thought there might have been a fire, because she saw workers bolting out of the restaurant and people running across the road. It was only when a man in a reflective vest started directing traffic and told her there was a shooter that she understood what was actually happening. She described people running out crying and screaming and said it was, in her words, very scary. That's the kind of eyewitness account that doesn't need any embellishment. It speaks for itself. Bystander video that was later verified by news organizations showed a man outside the restaurant, appearing to prepare to fire on a vehicle. Other footage appeared to show the shooter firing into the front window of a parked car. Investigators have said they believe the shooter fired both inside the restaurant's vicinity and at vehicles in the parking lot, meaning the danger wasn't confined to one spot. People in cars, people walking through the lot, people inside the building, all of them were in the path of what was unfolding. Here's what has been confirmed by police and hospital officials, understanding that these numbers were described from the start as preliminary and subject to change as the investigation continued. 3 people were killed. 7 others were injured. Of those 7, 2 were treated and released from the hospital. 3 were listed in stable condition. 2 remained in critical condition as of the days immediately following the attack. Several of the wounded were taken to St. Luke's Magic Valley Medical Center, which at one point issued an alert asking the public to avoid the hospital unless facing an actual emergency, simply because of the volume of patients and family members arriving. One of those killed was an employee of In-N-Out. The company's president, Lindsay Snyder, confirmed this in a statement, saying the company had lost one of its associates that night. She didn't release the employee's name, but she described her as someone who was taking care of the restaurant's customers at the moment her life was taken. Snyder's statement was raw. She said her heart was broken, that her chest felt heavy, and that she had shed tears over what happened. In-N-Out's chief operating officer, Denny Warwick, also released a statement saying the company was heartbroken and was fully cooperating with the investigation. As of the initial days after the shooting, Twin Falls Police made a deliberate choice not to release the identities of those who were killed. Chief Hicks explained that this was out of respect for the families, who were still in the process of being notified. That's a standard and important practice in cases like this. It means that some of what circulates online, in the immediate aftermath, guesses about who was killed, are not confirmed by authorities, and spreading them prematurely can cause real harm to grieving families who haven't even been given the news yet through proper channels. Some information about individual victims has come out through people close to them rather than through police, and it's worth walking through carefully, since it fills in some of the human detail that official statements don't include. A local taxi service, North Star Taxi, announced on its Facebook page that it would be closed for several days because its owner, a man named Terry Dudley, had been injured in the shooting. According to friends and co-workers, Dudley was shot twice in the back while he was outside charging his electric vehicle in the parking lot. He was taken to a hospital in Boise with internal bleeding, underwent surgery, and was listed in stable condition, though a family friend cautioned publicly that he was not yet, in his words, out of the dark. That same friend, a co-worker named James Palmer, started a fundraiser to help cover Dudley's mounting medical expenses and described him as someone who quietly puts others before himself, works hard, and never hesitates to help someone in need. Separately, another family member told a news outlet that his son had been the armed civilian who confronted the gunman during the attack, and that his son was shot and critically wounded in the process. His wife and a friend, both of whom happened to be emergency room nurses, treated him at the scene before he was taken to the hospital. These accounts came from family members and co-workers, not from an official victim list released by police, so we're presenting them exactly as they were reported, without treating them as a complete or final accounting of who was hurt and how. On the day after the shooting, Twin Falls County's Sheriff's Office announced that crisis counselors would be made available to anyone who witnessed or was affected by the attack, set up at a local elementary school not far from the scene. That kind of resource, quiet and easy to overlook, next to the bigger headlines, is often where the real, ongoing impact of a shooting like this actually plays out. Long after the news cameras move on, it's counselors, support groups, and fundraisers that communities lean on. What connects all of these people isn't some dramatic narrative arc. It's the ordinariness of what they were doing. Someone was picking up food, someone was working a Saturday shift, someone was driving a fare and happened to be outside charging his car when the shooting started. That's the part of mass shootings that never gets easier to sit with. The people caught in them aren't in the wrong place doing something risky. They're doing exactly what any of us do on an ordinary Saturday afternoon. Twin Falls Police identified the gunman as 24-year-old Chad Williams. According to Chief Hicks, Williams died at the scene from a self-inflicted gunshot wound after being confronted by armed responders. Investigators say they are confident that he acted alone, and that there is no evidence at this point of any additional suspects or accomplices. Beyond his age, his identity, and the fact that he acted alone, official confirmed details about Williams are limited. Police have said his family has been notified and is cooperating with the investigation. Chief Hicks noted that the family's hearts are also broken during this time, acknowledging that they, too, are grappling with the aftermath of what their relative did. Attempts by reporters to reach the family directly in the days immediately following the shooting were unsuccessful, which isn't unusual given the scale of media attention that follows an event like this. Now, here's where we need to be careful, because this is exactly the kind of case where online speculation moves faster than facts. In the hours after the shooting, various social media posts circulated claiming to identify the shooter's online accounts, his supposed beliefs, his supposed motive, even his identity, before police confirmed it. Twin Falls Police specifically pushed back on some of this, stating that certain viral posts had misidentified the shooter entirely and asking the public to stop spreading unverified claims. That's worth repeating clearly. Police went out of their way to say that people online got it wrong and that the department wanted the public to rely on official statements rather than viral guesswork. This is a pattern that shows up after almost every high-profile shooting now. Before official confirmation even comes out, amateur internet sleuths start circulating names, photos, and screenshots, often based on nothing more than a vague physical resemblance or a rumor passed along in a comment section. Sometimes it's well-intentioned people trying to piece together information faster than official channels can provide it. Sometimes it's bad actors deliberately spreading confusion. Either way, the result is the same. Innocent people get falsely accused online, and law enforcement has to spend time and resources correcting a narrative that never should have existed in the first place. Twin Falls Police dealt with exactly that this weekend, and their public correction is a reminder that the fastest information online isn't always the most accurate. As of the most recent updates, no motive has been announced. Investigators have not linked the attack to terrorism, a political cause, a religious motivation, gang activity, or any manifesto. That doesn't mean investigators have ruled everything out. It means that, publicly, they have not confirmed any single explanation for why Williams did what he did. Any content you see elsewhere claiming to have cracked the motive should be treated with real skepticism unless it's coming directly from law enforcement. If there's a part of this story that stands out for the right reasons, it's how quickly people intervened. According to police and multiple witnesses, an off-duty Idaho State Police trooper and an armed civilian both engaged the shooter during the attack. Investigators believe their actions helped drive Williams away from continuing to fire on more people, and that their intervention likely prevented additional deaths. One witness, who was stopped at a traffic light just outside the restaurant when the shooting began, described watching the gunman move through the drive-through area toward his own vehicle, while someone else in the drive-through line, armed with a handgun, fired back at him. The witness described the shooter as panicked, looking around and moving erratically, and said he believed the armed bystander's actions kept the gunman from being able to target more people. Twin Falls County's sheriff later publicly praised the off-duty trooper and the civilian who returned fire, calling their actions heroic and crediting them with diverting the shooter and saving lives. It's worth being precise here, because officials have not said that either of these individuals fired the shot that ultimately killed Williams. What they have said is that their intervention changed the course of the attack. There's also a detail in the timeline that's easy to miss. As officers were searching the area for the suspect after the initial shooting, a second officer-involved shooting occurred nearby. No one was injured in that separate incident, and it's being investigated independently by the Jerome Police Department, since it involved a Twin Falls officer. This wasn't part of the original attack. It happened during the chaotic search that followed, and it's a reminder of just how tense and uncertain those first hours were for everyone on the ground, including law enforcement. The Twin Falls Police Department is leading the investigation, with the FBI providing assistance. An FBI spokesperson confirmed that agents were on scene, helping with the response. Investigators have said they are interviewing witnesses, reviewing surveillance footage and cell phone video from bystanders, and working through Williams's digital devices in an effort to reconstruct his movements before the shooting and understand what, if anything, motivated it. Chief Hicks has been careful in his public statements to describe the numbers, the timeline, and even some circumstances of the shooting as preliminary. That's standard practice in an investigation this size, and it's a signal to treat any single detail as potentially subject to revision as more evidence comes in. What has remained consistent across every update since Saturday is the core of it. 3 dead, 7 injured, 1 shooter, no confirmed motive, and an active investigation with federal support. It's also worth understanding why investigations like this take time, even when the shooter is already dead and there's no ongoing manhunt. Detectives still need to establish a complete timeline of Williams's movements in the hours and days before the attack. They need to determine where the weapon came from and whether it was obtained legally. They need to go through his phone, his computer, his search history, and any accounts he may have used, looking for anything that explains what he was thinking or planning. And they need to do all of that carefully enough that whatever they eventually say publicly can hold up, rather than rushing out a theory that later has to be walked back. That's part of why Chief Hicks has repeatedly said only that the investigation is ongoing, rather than offering an early guess at motive. There's also the second officer-involved shooting to account for, the one that happened during the search for the suspect, separate from the original attack. Because that incident involved a Twin Falls officer, it's being handled by an outside agency, the Jerome Police Department, which is standard procedure meant to avoid any conflict of interest in reviewing an officer's actions. No one was hurt in that incident, but it still has to be fully investigated and closed out on its own timeline, independent of the main case. In the immediate aftermath, nearby businesses in the same shopping center, including a Swig location and a Hawaiian food restaurant, closed temporarily while investigators worked the scene. Roads in the area, including a bridge connecting Twin Falls to the interstate, were closed for a time before reopening. Idaho's Governor Brad Little posted on social media asking residents to keep the Twin Falls community in their prayers, to follow directions from law enforcement, and to avoid the area while the response was ongoing. Idaho Senator Jim Risch released a statement saying he and his wife were monitoring the situation and praying for the safety of everyone involved, along with thanking the first responders on scene. Idaho's other senator, Mike Crapo, posted that he was monitoring the situation and urged locals and visitors to follow all directions from law enforcement, avoid the area, and report anything suspicious. Congressman Mike Simpson said his team was closely tracking updates from Twin Falls Police and that he was praying for everyone affected, along with the first responders on the scene. Idaho House Republicans released a joint statement as well, saying they were devastated by what they called a terrible shooting, and that their prayers were with the community and their colleagues as they grieved the loss. What stands out across nearly all of these statements, from the governor's office down to local lawmakers, is how much they lean on the same handful of words: prayers, monitoring, cooperation with law enforcement. That's not a criticism. In the first hours and days after an event like this, elected officials are working with the same incomplete picture as everyone else, and their public statements reflect that. The specifics come later, from investigators, not from press releases issued while the scene is still active. In-N-Out's leadership spoke publicly, more than once, in the days following the shooting. Lindsay Snyder said the company would be mourning alongside the families as they moved through what she called a very painful season, and that the company intended to stand together with the community and learn from what happened. Denny Warwick echoed that sentiment, describing the company as heartbroken and committed to supporting the investigation. For a restaurant chain that had just opened a brand new location days earlier, one meant to be a source of local excitement, the shift to grief happened almost instantly. Community vigils and fundraising efforts for victims and their families began within days of the shooting, organized by neighbors, co-workers, and local organizations rather than by any official body. That kind of grassroots response tends to happen after events like this, and it's often the most direct way for people outside the immediate law enforcement and media process to actually help the people affected. One thing that came up repeatedly in coverage of this shooting is a phrase that gets used more often than any of us would like: another chapter in the country's ongoing struggle with gun violence. It's a phrase that shows up after nearly every mass shooting in the United States, and it shows up here too, because the pattern is recognizable even when the specific location and names are new. A public place, a weekend afternoon, people doing something completely unremarkable. Then, without warning, a level of violence that turns an ordinary parking lot into a crime scene within seconds. That familiarity doesn't make it any less devastating for the people actually living through it. For the family of the In-N-Out employee who didn't come home. For Terry Dudley's family, watching him fight through surgery in a Boise hospital. For the parents of the civilian who stepped in and was shot for it. For the two people who, as of the last update, were still listed in critical condition. For every single customer and worker who ran out of that restaurant and will carry the sound of those gunshots with them for a long time. It's also worth sitting with the fact that this could have been worse. Investigators have been fairly direct in crediting the off-duty trooper and the armed civilian with limiting the scope of what happened. Whatever conversations this shooting sparks about safety, about response times, about how quickly ordinary people can end up in the middle of a decision to fight back or flee, those conversations are already happening in Twin Falls and beyond. This video isn't the place to resolve those debates. It's simply the place to make sure you have the facts straight before you go looking for answers elsewhere. As of today, several things remain unresolved. Police have not released the full names of everyone who was killed. A motive has not been confirmed. The investigation into Williams's background, his devices, and his movements before the attack is still active, and the secondary officer-involved shooting during the search is still being reviewed separately. What is confirmed is enough on its own to understand the scale of what happened. A gunman opened fire at a brand new restaurant on a busy Saturday afternoon. 3 people did not go home. 7 more were left injured, some critically. An off-duty trooper and an armed civilian stepped directly into danger and are credited with preventing the toll from being worse. A community that had just welcomed a new restaurant to their city is now organizing vigils and fundraisers instead. We'll continue to follow this story as more confirmed details come out, and will always aim to separate what's actually been verified by police and reporters from what's simply circulating online. If you want to stay updated as this story develops, please subscribe to this channel. This video is based on publicly available reporting and official statements from law enforcement, hospital officials, and involved parties as of the time of publication. Details of this case, including casualty figures, victim identities, and the circumstances surrounding the shooting, remain under active investigation and may be updated or revised as new information becomes available. No motive has been officially confirmed at this time. This video does not intend to spread speculation, misinformation, or unverified claims about any individual involved, and it does not name any victim whose identity has not already been made public through their family, employer, or another verified source. Viewer discretion is advised. If you are affected by this event, or by gun violence in general, and need support, please reach out to a local crisis line or mental health professional in your area.